Okay, so we're going to be talking about here the first episode of The Witcher. This is, of course, a series that's available on Netflix. This came out in 2019, although I just saw it. It seems really new to me, and it's 2020. But anyhow, we're just going to talk about our initial impressions and thoughts, and then maybe we'll get into a little bit of spoiler talk about the first episode of The Witcher. And then we're going to ask ourselves if we want to continue down this road and kind of review all of Witcher, or if we're just going to leave it here at the first episode. So tell me, Eric, what were your initial impressions of the first episode of The Witcher?
Well, I don't know. I mean, it's kind of funny the way that pilots are done these days. They don't necessarily feel like pilots anymore. Like, it's hard for me to imagine that this show was sold on this episode. So it's not a pilot in my, I'm sure it's not a pilot. I know the way, I've heard the way, I should say. I shouldn't say I know. It's not like I have insider knowledge. I've kind of heard the way Netflix works. And in fact, we've talked about this. We reviewed the Dark Crystal series, The Rise of Resistance, before. And they had a very good behind the scenes documentary of how that show was made. And one of the interesting things that they talked about in that documentary was that basically they were looking to do sort of like a CGI, or maybe like a CGI blended with puppets, or they kind of had all these kind of crazy ideas of how they were going to do the show. And basically Netflix came up to the Jim Henson Company and said, you know what? Let's just make it like the movie, and let's do puppets. Let's do Muppets. Let's do it live action. Let's not, obviously they enhanced it with CGI, but all the characters were practical. And so, I can kind of extrapolate from that. And I feel like, that's probably kind of what happened with The Witcher. Somebody decided that they wanted to do a Witcher series. I'm not very familiar with the book. In fact, it's kind of ironic. The way that I heard about the Witcher property in the first place was through this. This is a gift that my brother gave me one year, which is the Witcher video game. And I know there's a lot of people. This is actually the Witcher Wild Hunt for the PS4. And I'd never heard of the book or anything like that before. Like I had very little knowledge of the property or anything like that, or what it was, until I got the game. And I played the game a little bit, but it wasn't that interesting to me. I mean, I liked it, but it wasn't, because I have limited space on my PlayStation 4, I ended up getting rid of it and putting something else on. So with this first episode, I just feel like I'm missing a lot. I feel like I would benefit a lot if I played through that video game, if I played some of the other games, because I think there's several Witcher games. And I feel like I would have benefited a lot if I played those games and read the book. And I feel like I'm way behind the curve. What do you think, Dave?
Well, here's the thing for me. My initial impressions of it, I mean, I found it kind of interesting. I could tell from the tone of this that you tell me if I'm wrong, Eric. I've never really seen a lot of Game of Thrones, but I feel like they really want this to be kind of like Game of Thrones, because I was expecting it to be a little bit more action. And there were times when it's like, man, there's a lot of dialogue happening right now. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it just wasn't what I was expecting. I thought we were going to see him, killing monsters more, if that makes sense. Because they keep talking about that the Witcher, he hunts and kills monsters. They talk about that throughout the show. But I, having played D&D when I was younger, and then having read a lot of the Dragonlance books, I'm sure some people in the audience are probably familiar with those, particularly like the comic books that they adapted from Dragonlance. And then I've talked before about how much I love the Adventurers comics. They used to publish the black and white comics from the 80s, and then the spinoff titles that came out of that, whether it was Warriors or Ninja Elite. So I like this kind of world, and I like what I was seeing. And overall, I thought it was interesting, but I did feel a little lost at times. I think that's my general impression. It's like, I like
that's my biggest thing. My biggest thing is I feel like, obviously, this is like an introduction. Like, this is not even, to me, like the first act. In fact, I know because I've seen some of the teasers. One of the major characters isn't even introduced yet. I think they're going to be introduced in the next episode, and I don't like that. I have to say I miss the old pilot days when you kind of like. Okay, here's a good example. People criticize the first season of Next Gen all the time. They criticize it all the time, and I'm not like a huge defender of the first season of Next Gen. I think it's watchable, and there are several episodes I really like. But for the most part, I do understand its limitations. But Encounter at Farpoint is a great pilot, and I will defend Encounter at Farpoint all the time because all the elements are there, and we know exactly who these characters are almost immediately. They introduce them, we get a sense of who they are, and they never really change that much. You know what I mean? Like even all the way up to All Good Things, the last episode of Next Generation, they never really changed that much. So what I like is the world is put together. And now we can play with it. And now, of course, the writers, the producers who came and went all the way through Next Gen got to do all these neat different ideas and things like that. But because they had all the pieces. I don't feel like I have the pieces in this first episode of The Witcher. And clearly I don't. Like I said, one of the major characters hasn't even been introduced yet. You know, so I'm like, yeah, I don't get what the hell's going on. You know, now granted, maybe watching the second episode, I'll be like, oh, okay, it makes more sense now. But I just felt there was too much going on. And here's the thing: you mentioned this. Here's my big criticism. You mentioned this. It's very wordy, yet it doesn't really explain anything. It's kind of like wordiness that I'm just like, I'm not following this conversation at all. You know, like I'm just kind of zoning out and being like, there were points that I got bored. You know, where I actually started to get bored, and I almost fell asleep, Dave, because I did watch it late, and I haven't been getting good sleep because of everything going on. I just haven't ever since everything started. And I had moments where I was starting to fall asleep, and I'm like, it's so wordy. Can't you explain things to me a little bit better so me as someone who has not read the books knows what the hell is going on? I mean, I understand the basic premise of The Witcher from playing the game as far as the monster hunter. Oh, and I do have to say, the opening scene for me, I thought it looked cheesy. I thought the effects were not done well with that. When he kills that monster in the very first scene, it did not look right to me. It looked like, you know, B movie quality, you know, and that kind of, I think, took me out of it a little bit too. But as you mentioned, it's very wordy, and it's like, well, how come you're not explaining things to me better so I can follow this and understand what the hell's going on? I get that there's supposed to be some mystery, especially with the female character, with the young female character, the princess. I get that. I do understand that. But so much is happening and so much is going on without any real explanation. Like, did you even understand who the enemies were and why they decided to kill everybody? Like, I didn't understand exactly what that was, you know?
Yeah, and like I said, that's my main, you know, sort of criticism I'd have to say is the fact that I was lost a lot of the time. It's like, okay, this kingdom is under siege. These people are taking, but it's so weird because it's like when you watch other things, like let's take Highlander, for example. When the Kurgan and his people attack, you kind of get, you understand what's happening, right? You get, you know, there's a couple of lines of dialogue as they're on horseback as they're leaving, right?
Well, it's very straightforward. It's two rival clans and they're fighting each other.
Exactly.
That's self-explanatory.
But it's like in this, there's a lot of pageantry to it. You know, they're knighting people. Well, we're getting into spoiler conversation now, but they're kind of knighting people and whatever, and then they go off and you can tell they're going to fight this battle, but you have no context. I'm like, okay, do they want to take over the land? Do they have a beef with them? Like what why are they fighting? You know, like there's no, for me, I couldn't follow what was going on. And then it was weird too, because it was like, okay, this lady who could be this little girl's mother is actually her grandmother? Like, is she that old? Like, what happened?
Yeah, that was very confusing to me. That was very confusing to me.
And that's overall, I'd have to say that's my criticism. Now, they do have a really, really awesome sword fight. They had two, actually. That whole scene where the Witcher character, Geralt, or whatever his name is, and he comes back to the town and he fights the guys. Looks like he's going to fight in the tavern. Like, I really like that sword fight scene And then when he takes on the lady who may or may not be a witch or something, I don't understand what her deal is either. I was
the
like,
demon is the way I understood it.
She's
She may or
kind
may
of
not be a
enchanted,
demon,
but not. Yeah. I don't know. But that was kind of my. But that's some of that swordplay was really well done, and that was the thing that kind of kept me hooked there towards the end. I'm like, okay, well, this is at least fun. I'm enjoying this swordplay. They've obviously done their research, and this is cool. Especially the one female character who was fighting with the. It was either a dirk or a dagger, and then the long blade at the same time. Like a lot of that stuff was fun to watch. I love when people do, double bladed stuff. So I enjoyed watching all of that, but I honestly, I didn't understand what her deal was. I couldn't tell, is she a sorceress? Is she a witch? Is she something else? I can't follow along. And that was the thing. I was just, most of the time I was like going, okay, you're saying something. Some people are mad, but I don't understand what the point. I felt like I had no context for what I was watching.
Well, this is the limitation, I think, of what the term, what is now what serialized storytelling, right? Because that's all the rage now. Everything has to be serialized. We can't have anything be episodic anymore. We can't have self-contained stories because that's passé. You know what I mean? I would argue the first episode of every single damn show should be, episodic. It should be a first, second and third act. It should be a complete story to introduce the characters. And that's the way pilots used to be made because pilots often didn't get picked up. This is, I think, one of the limitations of the way the business is done now, especially with a studio like Netflix. Netflix doesn't do pilots anymore. They might do some proof of concept stuff. Like, for instance, I'll use the example of Dark Crystal. They showed some of the proof of concept stuff they did, including some of the mix of CGI with the puppet. And Netflix says, we don't like that. Let's just do puppets. You know what I mean? And so you can tell that they did proof of concept stuff, but I don't think they do pilots anymore. You know what I mean? That once they decide they're going to do something, they're going to do it. So instead of having like a complete story where we flesh out the characters at least a little bit, so we at least know who they are, we don't do that because this is not even the first act of the story. As I said, we have not even gotten one of the major characters yet. This is not even a first act. So it's like, we talked about Picard, which I loved, you know what I mean? Which I adored. And the entire first 10 episodes, the entire first episode is the first act of a story, and very clearly is the first act of the story. It's not a real story. You know what I mean? It's the beginning of a story, So I don't like that. I really don't. And maybe I'll like it more with the second episode, but right now like I said, I feel kind of lost, and I feel like, it's a little too wordy. Without explaining anything. It's like, if you're going to talk a lot, explain what the hell's going on. You know what I mean? Get me involved in the world. So, you talk about Game of Thrones, because I was a big Game of Thrones fan, especially in the early seasons. And I could think the first episode, I knew exactly what was going on. I knew exactly what the world was. It's very simple. Ned Stark is basically the friend of the king. The king is having some problems. There's a rival, basically the last Targaryen of the previous house. And it's just all set up immediately. They already put in the undertones of the White Walkers. I mean, everything is right there in the first episode, and you already kind of know what's going on. It's this rivalry between these different houses. The king's kind of in the middle. We still have what's left of the previous house. And now we got this supernatural thing coming. And you get it all in the first episode. You get it all in the first episode, and you know exactly what's going on. I don't know what the hell's going on in this show. You know what I mean? That's
that's kind of my thing, because when they showed us the castle, for example, I kept thinking it's a shame there's not like a narrator saying, and in the kingdom of blah blah blah, at the castle of so and so, where the young princess's mother and father were murdered. Like, just something.
Even some text at the bottom of the screen kind of telling us, something, again, and Joss, he says, so you feel like you had a meal, but you were left still hungry, not enough substance to feel like you want to see another episode. And I think that's exactly right. That's kind of how I feel. It's like, on the one hand, to use that analogy, you don't want to be stuffed. You know what I mean? Like, okay, I got what I wanted, and I don't need any more. but you want to feel like satisfied, like you kind of understand the world enough so that it's interesting to you, you know?
Yeah.
And right now, I don't feel like I understand the world at all. And again, I did play some of the game. You know what I mean? So I kind of understand the Witcher. Obviously, you play as the Witcher in the game. I don't know any of these other characters. I have no idea who they are. I have no clue. It's just kind of weird.
Yeah. So, and just to say, like, as far as like some of the design work, like the design work, I thought was really interesting. Like visually, it's a very interesting world to look at. I liked a lot of the armor, and as I said, some of the swordplay I saw I thought was really, really good. I really enjoyed some of the swordplay, and I like Cavill. Just generally speaking, I everything I've seen him in, I've always enjoyed him and everything. He's very charismatic and interesting. But like I said, my initial opinion, my initial review of this first episode of The Witcher is I'm a little lost and I don't quite understand what's happening. That's my whole take on this first episode of The Witcher. I'm a little confused.
Well, I do want to say this, like you mentioned, you like the swordplay, and that's something that maybe will keep you coming. Which, by the way, is the swordplay enough to keep you coming? Is this something that you want to continue watching?
I don't know. I'm on the fence.
There you go.
I'm on the tip of the blade. I'm on the tip of the blade.
The tip of the blade. The thing that I like, the thing that intrigued me, is I was a big fan of the old Prince Valiant Family Channel cartoon series. Okay, I really like that show. And the way that begins with Prince Valiant is basically his kingdom is attacked and destroyed in the first episode. But you get a real sense of what's going on. Like, the people that are attacking are basically like kind of a marauder, Viking kind of people. That's what they do. They're not good. You know what I mean? And Prince Valiant and his family, they flee with like a handful of their people, and they're in exile. And of course, Prince Valiant then needs to find King Arthur to save his kingdom because they've lost. The first episode, they've lost. You know what I mean? The main character is lost. So now he has to go on a quest to find, King Arthur. Now, we have a similar setup in The Witcher, where basically we have this princess character that's gone through the same thing. But I'm so confused. I don't feel that same kind of investment as to, well, what's going on? It doesn't seem to me like there's even any possibility of restoring the kingdom because they killed everybody.
Yeah.
So at that point, I'm like, so what's the motivation? If everybody's dead, like in Prince Valiant, they didn't kill everybody; they conquered them. They got conquered, so they need to take the throne back. That's the whole point of the story. You know what I mean? Is Prince Valiant's going to get King Arthur to help him take back his father's crown? And in this, you don't get a sense of, well, what's the point? They killed everybody. She's the only one left, so. You know what I mean? Granted, right. Obviously, she seems to have some sort of supernatural power, and obviously, that's she's the key to everything. Which I kind of get sick of that phrase, but she's like the key to everything. That's pretty obvious. But it's like I wish they had a kind of like what would have been nice for me is like they had that Black Knight that was clearly like kind of the captain of the guard or something like that. Like if she was running around with him, you know what I mean? Like that would intrigue me a little bit more. You know what I mean? Like if there were like a couple other people with her, you know what I mean? That would intrigue me more than this sort of just weird situation where she just runs off by herself into the woods and everybody else apparently is dead. So that's kind of where I'm at. I like the that basic idea when a kingdom falls and is destroyed like that. I just like it to be a little bit more straightforward, a little bit better explained to me as to what happened. What did I just see? What just happened exactly?
Right, and that was like me. I felt like I didn't have enough context to understand what I was seeing. So let's go ahead and break it on down here. So I'd say if I was going to give it a letter score, I would give Witcher. It's got good production value. It's got good acting in it for the most part, even though I'm a little disconnected from some of it because I don't have the context. I like some of the choreography and the swordplay. I'd say I'd give it a B minus. That's what I would give it, a B minus. So then I have to ask myself, it's like, am I interested to watch a second episode? I'm going to say I'm going to put it up to Eric. Eric, if you're intrigued enough that we continue down this road, I'm willing to continue down this road. But if you're kind of like, no, I'm not feeling it, I'm probably okay to move on. How do you feel about it?
Well, I've heard this. I've heard reviews of this before that we're spoiler free, and a lot of people did the same thing I just did, and they said that they really did not like the first episode at all. But a lot of those people came back and said that they ended up really liking the series. So I'm willing to give it episode 2, but I'm giving it a lower review than you. I'm giving it like a D plus, because if we weren't doing reviews, I can say this: if we weren't doing reviews, I would not be watching another episode of this. But because we did a review of it, I feel more inclined to give another chance. Like I said, I know from the trailers at least one major character hasn't even been introduced yet. So I'm kind of, maybe that will help. Is kind of what I'm saying. Maybe it'll take a little bit different direction. Maybe it'll give us a little bit more explanation. A little bit more exposition. I don't know, but I am willing to give it another episode just to see that other main character, maybe get some more explanation. But I'm giving it a D plus. And by the way, I'm going to say this: I wasn't that impressed by the acting. I thought Henry Cavill was very wooden. The diction is kind of weird, the way he talks, and it almost feels like a Batman voice to me. You know what I mean? And I was just like, he's real husky, and it didn't seem very natural to me at all. And I like the actor. I mean, I'm not a big Man of Steel fan. I hate Batman versus Superman. But I really like Justice League, and I did like him, and I've always liked him. Like, I like him as an actor. I like him as Superman. But I didn't think his acting was very good. And that's just my personal opinion. I felt like the voice was too husky and too weird. It didn't sound natural. I get that he's a mutant or whatever, but still, it wasn't working for me. If anything, I'm more intrigued by the princess and would like to know exactly why she is the key to everything. And, what's going on? Why did they decide to kill all these people just to basically capture her? Because they didn't kill her, which is really weird too. They killed everybody else. They captured her, yet they let her go. Well, she escaped. You know what I mean? So I am a little bit more intrigued with her, with that character, actually, than I am with The Witcher at this point. So I'm almost like on the opposite of you. Like I'm kind of liking it for completely different reasons. You know what I mean? Because I just wasn't impressed that much with the rest of it. Oh, and the wizard character from the kingdom. Yeah. I'm kind of intrigued by him a little bit too, because he feels very Merlin to me, and I'm sure he survived, and he will see him again. You know what I mean? So I am a little intrigued by that character because I'm always like the Arthurian legends, and he does seem very Merlin to me. Would you agree he's very Merlin?
Yes, I would. Yes, I would.
So, and you got a shout out from James Stone. He was saying hi, Dave.
Hi, James.